It was first put together by Hugh Rock across the country, across the campus. We give out about $7 million. It really partners with different institutes across the campus that seed grants, but they're actually developing young, and the next one is with Virginia Wynn looking at maternal prenatal. Monday, May 7th at noon. So hope to see you.
And Hugh's contribution. Thank you, Hugh.
A typical good morning class to talk about the rapid, not independent. They're actually intimate connections with local, you guys in the audience, that systemic factors that come from the body develop oversights, not just on old technologies, but we can do better. And the education you mentioned helps the family structure, the children, and their. So the heterogeneity within even a single city is dramatic. And that was 90% in 1940, and now it's around 50% has gone.
For children really being, quote, hashtag disrupted. He is a rising star. Whenever I'm trying to advise Dr. to introduce her topic. Anyway, I just received an email all of about 10 minutes ago that said,
I'll talk a little bit about that. So thank you so much for the opportunity to right now is really benefiting children. I want to touch on a few things this morning as the outline of our talk is that field, which is harnessing the power of the immune system and for the course of his children with leukemia that they would be this century and treating children with cancer and specifically these. So these curves are from a paper in which they looked at studies of each other, meaning that we didn't really make much progress despite trying new things. And it's the part of an antibody that recognizes a protein or the antigen that you're looking for. Specifically, the target that is expressed on the leukemia cells or the cancer cell is eradicated. So the two big differences, I think, in the field, and not all the nuances, collected. Those cells kind of leave and go down this box. 20% survival in this series of relapsed children. So it grabs CD3 on your T cell, brings them together, and it enters. The outcomes were really astonishing. So, it was called the Ileana trial. And so, the FDA actually approved all the other members of the immune system, and there's lots of cytokines that start flying. Ventilation. Sometimes patients require vasopressors. And typically this happens. So if you have a low burden of disease, your risk of severe CRS is low. Anyway, there's been a lot of groups that have shown that the trajectory of a really nice paper that was published at the end of last year where they looked at, correlations that have not actually been observed in any patients. So these are things like oncogenesis is something that has been observed in gene therapy trials for things like a huge review of this done recently published in 2018. This is one of the parts that most interests me is that this is a nice example of one of the lymphoma patients who went in with disease in the abdomen. So are they $5,000 for one dose? So it was the most expensive. The answer is it is cost effective if therapy. Crystal has been an amazing advocate, obviously, and pioneer in the field.
Neuromuscular, for those who are muscular, we get the whole package and we have to deal with all aspects of the central nervous system. So watching someone talk about where it sits, but by being able to study these diseases in research opportunity, if you can abstract yourself from the years in the making to come up with these treatments. Learning these things, that's all that was cared about was the DNA. Highly regulated, so the cell has a lot of different capabilities. Cytoplasm where it's read into the protein. Actually showing that there was a deletion on chromosome 5 of a particular gene. SMA is that you have a second gene, as you might have guessed. Good news is that you have a spare tire. Building blocks for the SMN protein in each of these RNA transcript, you get one. What allows this unique approach to SMA. Is read as an A, the C is read as a C, so that you get a basic, you could actually build an antisense to that, so that you can ways. There are ways that you can get it to what it's supposed to, but it's been an enormous getting a system that would work reliably in animals. So all of those features had to go into this process. Or very little protein production. And then with the people that came to see me 5 years and 3 months ago, and you can see her kind of belly breathing as put her down and lay her back down extremely well, and are basically so she would have died within months of that first video. She was clearly that show significant benefit. That's the patient, that study from the patient that I showed. Proved it for everybody with SMA, irrespective of age, irrespective. We can spur this forward faster. It's in trial. Do the research unless the patients are well cared for.
Much. First, I just want to thank Mary Leonard. Also want to thank Grant Wells, who's here, who's actually mission control. They've done a phenomenal job for most meetings that I've had. An animal cell, they're very complex to make and they're very hard. Put the mac and cheese in, push the button, and you can make tons of it. Biologics are about 1,000 times more complex, and biologics are given intravenously or subcutaneously. Disease and ulcerative colitis, it's about $30,000. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, once you had this and maybe some of a drug to block tumor necrosis factor that I and my a problem. We also treated that they had a Crohn's disease activity index of about 300 with pediatrics as well. And in both of our trials, we actually treat. There are no rheumatoid arthritis patients in wheelchairs. Arthritis, we can save the joints, because once the joints are damaged, and some very tiny risk of lymphoma and other things, but for patients, they would reduce the price 20 to 30%.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank all the organizers for inviting me to children for various maladies. And the theme that underlies it all is our next child, CVS, and I realized this is kind of a crazy cells. When the cell dies, it dumps its nucleus in decades. So this paper was lost in the literature, never cited. People sort of remember blood, and it turns out it's there only when they're pregnant with a male baby. There's the mom's DNA. The fetal part is a small fraction, just a couple of percent. And sequencing them, all sequencers essentially work that way now. Cumulative results on thousands of women, and it all sort of worked the way we said it would. The rates of use of amniocentesis and other invasive measurements are declining precipitously. Codes for protein, it represents about 1% of the genome, and read out any coding mutation you wanted to in the fetal gene quite a bit after the operation to make sure they're not rejecting this approach on a pretty large number of the samples in the individual. Physiological measures of lung dysfunction, which are shown here in a variety of different. It's something that is affecting the lives of patients in the treatment to turn down the immune system enough that the body doesn't reject the new. And it sort of emphasizes the need for this. And it, that have sort of flavored the pediatric for testing, but it's not a perfect test by any means. Curious blood test, and it came back identifying this was a 9-year-old boy with endocarditis, and they switched the drugs again. It was something called the HASEC group, which and actually in this case they were able to confirm that this was. So as you sort of they've been doing, they covered couple hundred different pathogens. The numbers are, if you're an infectious disease doc, things that you maybe wouldn't have thought to test for. It's accumulating that this is really going to be the future of infectious disease diagnostics. Affected somehow, but is there. And that had kind of been ignored and has been interested in this sort of phenomena as well. So MADS was able to, reflect something earlier, the immune genes are also in an open greenfields area. On basic science and technology development, and a number of different clinicians.
Terrific presentations focusing on technology, push innovation, a lot of ready, fire, aim innovation. Large didn't have a clear getting into some meaningful examples of digital health technologies.
Specifically with off glucose production in the liver, and it also then shuts down panther. And in the next slide, what we see is what happens in the typically ask them to do finger sticks, poke their the past 3 months, and these are data from the type 1 diabetes exchange. There is an increase in some of the vascular damage that diabetes. How can this help us? How much urine, how much sugar is being passed in the urine? Then, but now 20 to 30 years later from that, we have these much more, say if they were in school or away from them, to know what was going on. Some of that burden that's placed on patients and families. CGM sensor glucose data, and we see preliminary studies in getting this to market so that now these patients have as well. TTD meeting in Vienna with another system, a patch pump.
6th grade now, so really not a long time. Nobody really knew anybody really well. There were needles that's going to make your kids feel that.
Last week on 2-year-olds, tested it in every different type of environment. There are a whole diabetes.
Really went above and beyond. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Diana Naranjo is using virtual reality, the work being done in diabetes and technology. And so just a brief
John, you pick on the wrong disease. And one of the things where we spent a lot of time was on the diagnostics and that was talking about, and this was as a means of not just detecting disease, but also being able to monitor a coil at the bottom under the dermal area, where you're just filtering out the protein and letting the water and the electrolytes and other interest in the disease, obviously, and he's a physiologist, but he was able in the last 8 years to advance new generation technology, either a gauze pad or a filter paper or one of these capillary coils. Because in 2007, California gave green light to do electrolytes, because they're not going to go into all the nuances that go into trying to measure. It's done through what we call coulometric titration, which is not easy. Creating a stimulator that will be in circuitry, and these are flexible circuit boards with alcohol. And the idea here is that you go to a park, to my iPhone, the patch that I put on the patient to